double doink.
Big boy's back.
9 to noon.
Ooh!
The Vikings.
Okay, calm down.
The Duke! The Duke! The Duke is on fire!
Vikings.
With the 10th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Minnesota Vikings select
J.J. McCarthy.
He's JJ! JJ to JJ for the payday!
With the 17th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Minnesota Vikings select Dallas Turner, linebacker, Alabama.
Yep. What's going on, everybody? It's the old NFL Scouting Combine, and Pete Bercich and I are in Indianapolis for it. And over the next 18 segments, this will be Speculation Central, and we'll include chats with coaches like Kevin O'Connell, Kevin Stefanski with the Cleveland Browns, Leslie Frazier, former Vikings head coach, now with the Seattle Seahawks, Pat Shurmur, that's coming up around the corner. He's the offensive coordinator for the Colorado Buffaloes, and so on as Combine 14 for yours truly commences. And despite much of the NFL week in Indianapolis, with people pining for sneaky free agent information, we are going to stay true to the roots of the Combine that has been in Indianapolis for 38 years. After brief stops in Tampa Bay, Arizona, and New Orleans, it's about the rookies and drafting the lifeblood of teams. We'll get into free agency too, but the two-day theme for Bercich and I will be making a meal from a morsel with the minuscule amount of draft picks the Vikings have, but also making much out of what they do have via free agency. And let's turn a little bit of that morsel into something big with the draft picks we have, starting with the best. I mean, there's nobody, and we mean nobody, who puts more work into evaluating the college kids to be drafted in a couple of months than ESPN's NFL draft and college football analyst Jordan Reid, who joins us to start Combine 2025. Thanks for helping out. Great to see you.
No problem. Thanks for being here. I don't know if you know this, PA. So every year, I always reserve my first radio row interview for you.
You must be going alphabetically.
5 years straight. 5 years straight.
Wow.
Got him fresh.
Thank you. Alphabetically, we got an A and a B. So now he's going to move to the table to the left, C for Cleveland.
Yeah.
Talk about the number 2 pick. You're very kind, ma'am. Who puts Jordan puts so much work into analyzing the draft. What's the difference for you between the NFL Combine and the week of Senior Bowl practices and the other All-Star games that you cover?
Well, it's a little bit different just because they're going against actual competition. At the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl, you get to see them go against live bodies and be in that environment that they're used to. Here at the Combine, it's more so of a controlled setting, whether it's the drills, the exercises that they're going through. And even though there's a little bit more pressure just because there's more eyes on them at the Combine and the testing, I always like that open competition at those All-Star games a little bit better, just because if you ask some questions about some guys, maybe you can confirm or deny some things you saw on tape.
Mm-hmm. Who at the Senior Bowl you think, who are the winners and losers, so to speak, that stood out to you? Because that's kind of what we want to get our listeners right now, is saying, hey, these are the names that are kind of coming up, and these are the guys that we're talking about. So who are the big winners you think down in Mobile?
Yeah, I mean, I can circle the whole defensive line group at the Senior Bowl, and that's really the strength of this year's class, the defensive line group, and just reeling off some names. Darius Alexander of Toledo is one that really impressed me, especially what you want to see out of those smaller school guys is that how do they fit in?
Yeah.
Just because you have questions about, were they just better than the competition that they were going against, and how will they go against these guys, from the ACC, the SEC, the Big 12, and I thought he was absolutely phenomenal. Walter Nolan of Ole Miss is another that really impressed me as well, and he's a player that I'm very high on.
With the transfer portal now, the way it is in college football, Does that even make it a bigger question mark about why a guy would stay in Toledo or in a smaller school?
Well, it makes it harder to track guys just because guys are moving all over the place. But when that player does stay at a place like that, it shows loyalty with a lot of guys. And we saw that with Quinyon Mitchell last year with how well he played at the Senior Bowl. And, there were teams that were poaching him and trying to get him away from Toledo. And he said, no, I'm going to stay here. And Darius Alexander was the exact same way.
Now, outside of the draft, with the Browns table just to the left of us, I started thinking about this a little bit. If Myles Garrett indeed is available for trade, and we're led to believe that he is, if you were the Vikings, would you call Cleveland and offer whatever it takes to get Myles Garrett? And how much do you think he would help what Brian Flores does?
Well, whenever you're talking about a player of Myles Garrett's caliber, you're always going to call just to see what the price is. And, with Kwesi having a working relationship with Andrew Berry in the past as well, you probably started off with a friendly conversation and then just see where it goes from there. But with the lack of draft capital that the Vikings have this year is going to make it really challenging. But if I can't add a Myles Garrett, I'm never going to say no to that, just because 9 times out of 10, you're not going to draft a player that's the caliber of Myles Garrett that you're going to get from him right away, a player that I think is going to be wearing a gold jacket one day before it's all said and done. So I would make the call, but the lack of draft capital makes it very challenging.
All right, so, the Sam Darnold's set to become a free agent. The Vikings can franchise tag him and trade him off the tag. And Cleveland may be in need, A, of a quarterback, but B, of a quarterback who Stefanski knows can play right now. So just consider that piece as the dreaming goes, consider that piece to the side. The Vikings picked 24th overall this year, and they have a first-round pick next year. So if the Vikings were to, say, give 2 first-round picks as a starting talking point for Myles Garrett, would you consider that this year and next year?
I would, just because even though Myles Garrett is a special player, you have to look towards the future as well. And then you also have to factor in, I think the Vikings are already very talented at edge rusher. I mean, I thought they knocked it out the park last year with Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel. And then also, you have to remember, they still want to develop Dallas Turner as well. So if you acquire a Myles Garrett, that's going to eat into a lot of the development of Dallas Turner already. So while I would love to add a player like Myles Garrett, I would look more towards the future with those 3 talented edge rushers that I already have on the roster.
ESPN draft analyst and a longtime friend of the 9 to Noon radio show, Jordan Reid, at Jordan_Reid, if you'd like to follow him on Twitter.
Jordan, talking about the quarterbacks in this year, last year obviously you had the 6 that went so highly. This year it kind of comes down to Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Cam Ward is, from what you hear, the number 1, and then the questions are, with Shedeur Sanders being a quote-unquote pocket passer. What are your thoughts on both of those guys, and where do you think Sanders is going to end up? Because I think that's kind of the big speculative part of this draft.
Well, 2 vastly different quarterbacks, I will say, but the resumes are eerily similar. What I mean by that is both quarterbacks started in the FCS ranks, with Cam Ward starting at Incarnate Word, and then also Shedeur Sanders at Jackson State. They move on to the FBS with Cam Ward going to Washington State, then to Miami. Shedeur Sanders then going to Colorado. Both of those guys put up gaudy statistics. But when I look at Cam Ward, I see a little bit more creativity within his game. He can play inside of structure than outside of structure as well. But the mentality that he plays with, that's what I love the most about Cam Ward. And yes, I know he does have some warts in his game of where he is selectively aggressive. That's what I like to call it. Of where he'll have about 3 or 4 throws a game that'll make you say, man, what the heck was he thinking on those? But outside of that, that's really just the life of a playmaker as a quarterback. And you think about guys like, not saying Cam Ward is these guys, but when I think about Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, they take those opportunistic opportunities, even though there's a lot of risk associated with it. So that's what I like the most about Cam Ward's game. And then with Shedeur, he's more polished from the pocket, from a decision-making standpoint, being able to play on schedule. I think he does that a little bit better than what Cam Ward currently does. Now, he's not the athlete that what Cam Ward is, but I think just from an in-the-pocket standpoint, the ball placement and the accuracy, I think is much further ahead than Cam Ward right now.
What do you, if the Vikings keep 24, and we're a couple of months away, names, like who do you like? What do you like? What are your theories with that?
Well, first one for me is not a name. It's actually trade back, just because of the lack of draft capital.
Get more picks.
If they are able to trade back, they're only set with 3 picks right now, potentially getting 4 if they get the third-round comp pick for Kirk Cousins. So just having that limited amount of draft capital, I will look to trade back. But, of course, it takes 2 to tango when you're talking about a trade or potentially trading back. But if they do not have the opportunity to trade back, I think it comes down to 2 positions, and that's either defensive tackle or cornerback. I would look for them to, draft a guy like a Walter Nolan of Ole Miss, Derek Harmon of Oregon, Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. All 3 of those names I definitely would keep an eye on. But if they go corner, I will look at somebody like a Azariah Thomas from Florida State. He's a name that is very intriguing. Maxwell Hairston is another name out of Kentucky that I think is really intriguing as well. So they'll have their pick of the litter as far as what they want to go to at that position or either one of those positions. So I'm really interested to see what Kwesi does.
And Green Bay picks right in front of the Vikings. And Jair Alexander probably won't be on the team next year. Likewise for Eric Stokes, who's had a really rough run of it in the first place, mostly due to injury. So they could be cornerback needy. So what do you think of the corners in this draft, say like with Thursday and Friday, the first 3 rounds?
Yeah, I think it's really strong. Now, it's not what we've seen in years past. There's not a Sauce Gardner or a Derek Stingley Jr., in my opinion, even though Will Johnson of Michigan is very talented. I don't think he's the caliber of corner of those 2 guys coming out. But after that, this second cluster is really interesting to me just because it's a lot of guys that didn't finish the year just because they were so banged up, whether it's a Benjamin Morrison at Notre Dame who had the hip injury, Savone Ravel at ECU who tore the ACL this year, and Maxwell Hairston, he battled some injuries this year as well. So there's a lot of injury concerns with these guys. So that's why I say when it comes down to 24, if the Vikings want to trade back to later on in the first round or, have 2 second-round picks, there's going to be a lot of guys for them to target early on in that at 24, early in the second round.
How about the interior offensive line position? How's that look for this draft, and what bodies might be available at that time?
I think it's good, not great overall, in my opinion. And, guys at the top of the draft like Tyler Booker of Alabama is one name that I think will go much before 24, just because there's so many interior offensive line needy teams. Gray Zabel is a really interesting name out of North Dakota State. He's one I would have my eye on. But if you're waiting
he's the one that had a good Senior
Bowl.
Right?
He was by far and away the best player, regardless of position, at the Senior Bowl to me. So,
Gray Zabel.
Gray Zabel. He's a dang good player. He can play all 5 positions up front. He can play. I think he's a center or a guard on the next level, though. So he's really intriguing. Jonah Savanea out of Arizona, who's more so of a second or third round player. Emory Jones out of LSU is another player that I find really intriguing as well. He primarily played right tackle at LSU, but I think he's a guard on the next level.
What this time last year, what did you think of Dallas Turner? And then watching all the games, because you watch all the games of all the teams, quite honestly, what did you think of how his season finished? He came on a little bit at the end. What improvement would be required this year for Dallas Turner?
Well, I love the plan that they had for them just because they didn't rush him into action. I love that they signed Grenard and also Van Ginkel just so you can use him at so many places. But what I love the most is that they didn't really give him a whole bunch of responsibilities early on in the year, and they really allowed him to develop at his own pace. And I think they really felt the results of that later on in the season. And, with Dallas, he always had a ways to go as a pass rusher, in my opinion. It was more so just relying so much on his athleticism. And I think that's what hurt him early on in the season. They saw that. So they spent some more time in his development, and they just allowed him to really develop at his own pace. But sitting behind guys like Van Ginkel and then also Grenard, it allowed him to play multitude of different positions as well. You saw him lining up in the A gaps, dropping in cover sometimes and then rushing off of the edge too. So even though he wasn't getting a whole bunch of snaps off of the edge, it allowed them to play him in so many different spots too.
So with the team that drafts Travis Hunter, and here's the third Cleveland Browns reference because their table's right next to us in the Indianapolis Convention Center, and they might draft Travis Hunter. And the offensive coordinator, Pat Shurmur, very good friends with Kevin Stefanski, head coach of the Browns. I believe they've already talked about Travis, Shador, and the wide receivers coming into the draft from Colorado. So, I think Kevin's certainly more squared away with that at this stage of the equation. But with Hunter, for the team that takes him, he's going to combine as a corner. But there's gold in them Tar Heels, right, man? I mean, you can use him full-time corner, lay off him on offense for like 3 games. then all of a sudden you got a big game. He's like playing every play in the fourth quarter because you worked on it. That could be brilliant.
He's rare to me, PA. He's by far and away the best player in the draft to me, and I've been saying it on TV every time I talk about Travis. He's the best two-way player, and this was before my time, but just based on being a football historian, since Champ Bailey when he was coming out in the late 90s. That's the player that he reminds me of, and I think he has that type of potential. Now, where would I play Travis? I would play him as a corner, just because I think that's where he's better at as a corner, but also I've never heard of a player being full-time wide receiver and then part-time corner. That's very rarely happened, and the only player I could think of is maybe Troy Brown in New England with Bill Belichick. So I would play him full-time as a corner and then build a package for him, maybe 15 to 20 plays a game as a wide receiver, just because I think you would be tying one hand behind your back if you just limit that guy to one position just because he's so special on both sides of the ball.
ESPN draft analyst Jordan Reid to start Combine 2025 on KFAN and Vikings.com. Pete Bercich and Paul Allen, a couple more for JR. Do you believe the Vikings need to run differently than like Dalvin put up big numbers, had a really good year, Kevin's first year. It completely fell off the next year. And then Aaron, when he was healthy, he was giving the team a lot of pop. And then Cam Akers came in and gave the team some pop too. So they can run. But do you believe they need to run differently? And do they absolutely need to leave this draft with a running back, given how many good ones are in it?
Without question. They have to come out of this draft with their running back. And I've been saying, even if your team doesn't need a running back, take one.
Yeah.
This class is very reminiscent to 2017 to me when we got 30 running backs selected. I think we should get at least 30 drafted in this year's draft class. And that'll be the first time that happened.
So you're going to get starters
2017.
From Saturday picks.
Yep. Yeah, and
wow.
I don't think the scheme is bad by any stretch of the imagination. I just think the body types that they have, the type of things that they want to do, I just don't think they have that type of player on the roster. So I think they need a bigger type of back that you can run some of those gap or man type of schemes with, just because, I love Aaron Jones, but he's not the type of guy that you want running between the tackles 20 to 25 times a game. That's just not him.
Yeah.
You want him in a zone scheme and using him in the slot, using him out wide. He's just that type of back. So they need a big banger, bruiser type of running back that I think could take a litany of those type of workloads.
Is there anything close to Jahmyr Gibbs in this draft?
No. Just the speed that he plays with. He's like
so
a Corvette,
sweet.
man. He goes from 0 to 60 back to 0 in 2 seconds. So there isn't that type of running back.
Okay.
But, this is a really, really good running back class, though.
Pete Tom?
If you were a gambling man, what happens with Sam Darnold? Where do you think he ends up?
Oh man, you put me on the spot. I think he plays elsewhere, just because I think they're ready to just start the J.J. McCarthy era, and that was the whole purpose of taking him at number 10 overall last year, just to reset the cheap quarterback clock and take advantage of the quarterback contract. So as good as Sam was last year, they're going to have to make the tough decision of what they want to do, but I think he plays elsewhere in 2025.
Congratulations on your success. Excellent work every time we hear you on the radio or watch you on TV. God bless you, young man, and thanks for stopping by.
Thank you always, guys. Always a pleasure.
That's Jordan Reid, ESPN draft analyst at Jordan_Reid via the tweet machine. And that's part of the Timber Tech What's on Deck set list, which includes Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, 11 a.m. Central. He'll be at this table. KOC at 11 o'clock today, plus much more. Field Yates with ESPN. He'll join about 45 minutes from now. And around the corner, I had the opportunity to record an interview with former Minnesota Vikings offensive coordinator and a current Colorado Buffaloes offensive coordinator, Pat Shurmur, talking a lot about Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. With Pete Bercich, I'm Paul Allen. Nordo guides the Great Ship Love Covenant from FM 100.3 KFAN. We have a bunch of our Vikings Entertainment Network friends here aiding us at the Indianapolis Convention Center. And Pat Shurmur joins the program around the corner on KFAN.